Hello, and welcome back to the CUNY Black Male Initiative monthly dialogues. I am your host, Dr. Shawn, the University Director for the CUNY Black Male Initiative, and we're so delighted to have you back here joining us again with this amazing, astounding, world-renowned panelists and guests that are joining us this month. We're so excited to be celebrating Black Music History Month, and we're going to be really bringing you a lot of great content and great conversation here today. But I just want to give you a quick overview of why we do this and remind you of who we are. The CUNY Black Male Initiative supports over thousands of students at the CUNY system in getting their HSEs, which is their high school equivalency degree, or their GEDs, to getting their associate degrees, their bachelor's degrees, and even their law and medical degrees. As students are getting supported along the way, they're receiving mentorship support, academic support, as well as social-emotional support, so that they have support on their journey on their way to pursuing their educational dreams. And so as we support these students across all these different institutions, all 25 CUNY institutions, we have 31 programs led by 31 BMI project directors that are really designed to help the students get access to information and opportunity to the things that are going to help them grow their careers and grow their own academic journeys into fruition. And so as we do this work, we bring these dialogues to you monthly to make sure that students understand that there are those in the community behind us, supporting us and giving us sort of a light way and a guiding post to follow as we pursue our own individual dreams. And so they can see that if these panelists have done it, they've accomplished in their own careers, in their own personal lives, what they've wanted to accomplish, that maybe us as CUNY BMI members and family, we can do it too. So we're delighted to have some amazing guests. And I want to just really do a quick overview before we have them launch in, just to talk about what this month is all about. So our theme is that there's a message in our music and that we're Black on purpose. So when we think about why this series exists, this month is particularly special to me. As you see the mural behind me, many of you know that I had a whole life as a musician for many years before I became the University Director for the CUNY Black Male Initiative. But we can all agree that the environment that has been created over the past year, and even more since George Floyd and Sandra Bland and Breonna Taylor, and those who have been senselessly murdered by police officers, and the social unrest that has ensued as a result of it, we can all agree that we've had many needs for mental health and many needs for our community to be supported in healing and growing from those difficult moments. And so when we think about the role that music plays, we see that it plays a huge role over the years in our community through different crises throughout generation to generation. So we can agree that sometimes that in the moment of social crisis, that music can be transformative, it can be uplifting, it can be life-changing, it can be also just habit-breaking, forming in a way that we're able to see our future and our possibility through the song, through the written word, through the spoken word, and through the actual played instrument. And so we are people who are darker than blue, right? Based on our African descent, we know that we've used the word to really perpetuate the messages across generation to generation. Going back 50 years ago, thinking about how Marvin Gaye limited what's going on as a song that helped us understand how do we express the sign of the times? How do we talk about it? We've heard songs like Mercy, Mercy Me, calling for mercy in our communities from the violence that we're suffering. We've heard the song Flying High in the Friendly Skies. We've heard the song What's Happening, Brother. Prince even provided us with a narrative in the song Sign of the Times. The Temptations warned us to slow down and pay attention to what's happening socially, and talking about living in a ball of confusion, right? We have all these songs and posts, guiding posts in our community that helped us with understanding how to digest what we're going through as a people, as a Black people, and as a Black community. When I say Black, I'm talking about all of us. I'm talking about Caribbean, I'm talking about African, I'm talking about if you are Latino or Latinx community, I'm talking about all those who descend and who own and claim that African history in our lived experience. So as we think about our goal today, it's really to empower, uplift, and be informative in how we actually use music to perpetuate our messages going forward and help us be empowered in who we are. I think about my time in South Africa and watching some of the end of the apartheid end with the Amandla as a song of power that people were chanting through the street and through their marches to help sing their way into freedom, sing their way into purpose, sing their way into the integrity and character that they needed to proceed into a society that was free from the slavery that apartheid held them under for so long. So we're going to be talking about a lot of things today, and I want to get to our panelists right away so we can talk about who they are. I'm going to read just a quick little bio intro for all those who are joining us today, and we even have a surprise guest that is coming to you a little bit later during our time together. We're first starting with our guests, Allan Harris, Beverly Page, and Will Calhoun. And when I tell you these are the who's who in the world of making music, we are so privileged to have you all here joining us today. First, I'm going to start with Mr. Allan Harris. He's established as one of the jazz world's most acclaimed vocalists. He possesses this potent combination of dynamic vocal abilities, impeccable phrasing, and also powerful emotional resonance. He has earned so many awards. I'm not going to read them all, but he's been heralded by the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Jazz Times, Downbeat, Atlantic Magazine as a real storyteller through authentic interpretations of the American songbook. He's mesmerized people in over 20 different countries and audiences all around the world. He's performed in many musical festivals worldwide, and also has been locally featured in the Blue Note downtown and Bird's Basement and Jazz at Lincoln Center, and also in the London Olympics and the Scullers and Jazz Bakery and all these Joe's Pub and all the places that we as musicians and those who as music fans probably know and love. So Mr. Allan Harris, welcome to the stage. It's good to have you here, my brother.
It's an honor to be here, believe me, Shawn. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's talk about Beverly Page and what she's done. She is an amazing specialist and communications consultant who has specialized in celebrity, community, and corporate press and public relations for over 25 years. She's a CEO and president of PageMaker LLC, creating, strategizing, and implementing campaigns for music industry icons for many, many years. She's worked with Earth, Wind, and Fire's production company, Herbie Hancock, Johnny Matthews, George Duke, Patti LaBelle, rest in peace, George Duke, that was my dude. Gamble and Huff's Philadelphia International Records Group. She's also was the publicist for the landmark Victory Tour for Michael Jackson, and also represented the late Luther Vandross and Stevie Wonder. She's got hits all over the place, has done communication all over the place. She's been the VP of the Polydor label group and developed campaigns for artists like Salt and Pepper to Larry Blackmon to Alita Adams. And in her position as vice president of Universal Island Black Music, she headed corporate communications and media relations and did a lot of campaigns for Drew Hill, T.D. Jakes, Karen Clark, Ron Isley, Steve Harvey, Russell Simmons, Jay-Z, so on and so forth. She's been named one of the top women executives in the entertainment industry by Ebony Magazine. She's also a recipient of the Delta Theta Sigma Lillian Award for Communications. She holds a BA in Legal Studies and also is an adjunct professor at SUNY Rockland. She's got a really well-known piece and love, peace and soul behind the scenes of America's favorite dance show, Soul Train, that you should check out through Backbeat Books. She is a hit maker, and if you know her, you know she's been in the field a long time doing a lot of great stuff. Beverly, I could read on and on about you, but congratulations for all your accomplishments and welcome for joining us today. You're on mute.
And I'm listening to you and I'm like, Shawn, let Shawn take a sip of water. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm telling you, thank you. And as Allan said, it's an honor for me to be here in front of your students and our audience. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So many people will get a chance to hear your voice, and I believe your spirit will pass on to many who are watching today. Finally, last but not least, certainly he's been with us before, and he is a legend. He is someone who I, in my own musical career as a drummer, looked up to for many, many years. The Bronx native, Will Calhoun, Berkeley music graduate, two-time Grammy winner. He was with the iconic rock band Living Colour for many years, still is doing his thing. He's produced and toured with a wide range of artists. I can't even read all of these artists that he's been with. So I'm just going to name a couple of quick hitters. So Harry Belafonte, legend. B.B. King, legend. Wayne Shorter, legend. Public Enemy, legend. Philip Glass, Mick Jagger. His website is willcalhounart.com. Go check him out, read his bio. He's been doing the damn thing for many, many years. And when I think about people who are not only influential and shakers globally, but also someone who's accessible, who's down to earth, who will have a conversation with you, who will collaborate with others who are on this call. He has been accessible to our community for many years. Will, we're so honored to have you here joining us again. Thank you for being here, my brother.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me back. And it's great to be on this panel with these other two fantastic artists in the universe.
Absolutely, absolutely. So here's what I want to start with you all, because there are too many questions I have on my agenda for today. And I really want to make sure we're having a conversation that feels real and that feels like the audience can actually benefit, especially those young people who are watching, who are not sure where to go and how music can play a role in their lived experience. So I'd like to just start by the idea of Black music and thinking about its role in our society. There's this sort of phrase that you've heard before, that everybody kind of wants to sound Black or look Black, but nobody want to be Black, right? So how has Black music for you as an artist been able to maintain and remain a central focal point of our cultural, emotional, and spiritual experience? Our cultural, emotional, and spiritual experience. So I'd love to start with Beverly and then jump to Will and then jump to Allan. So Beverly, how has Black music remained a central part of our culture, central part of our emotional and spiritual experience? And you have to unmute for us, Beverly. All good, no worries. We got you.
Right. You know, when for a question like that, music and spirituality have always been inseparable. And it reflects the depth of, you know, our strength, you know, our pain, and even our personal growth. So when you ask, or we're asked, you know, in terms of music, where, you know, Black music goes, how we feel about it, you know, or where we think it's going, or how it reflects in our lives today, it's spiritual, it's holistic for us, you know. So it's almost, you know, and I was thinking about similar question that you're going to ask. And I was thinking about when we look at, you know, we listen to music and talking about the young people and the hip hop music. And there's something, you know, it's that line that they go through and it's like, and it's like that beat, boom, boom, and it just rises in them. Same thing when you're listening to even gospel music and it's rising in you spiritually. And at that end, your arm is going up and you're pumping it, and it's hallelujah, because it's spiritual. So that's the answer in kind of a nutshell for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. And we're going to expound on that a little bit more for sure. But let's keep it going. Will.
Emotionally, it's survival for me. It's the language. It's more than 40,000 years old. It's an ancient language. Some research which I've done on the continent in the last 30 years. I just returned from Sierra Leone, and just trying to more and more connect with historically the definition, what the emotion is, and being a drummer, as we both are, in learning these beats. James Brown is funky, but where does the funk come from? James Brown's funk comes from Nigeria, you know, and Nigerian festive music on top of that. So that's the connection of why we hear James and we all go bananas. Although James in his own right is brilliant, those rhythms have a definition to them, a very old and sacred and real definition to them. So emotionally, I'm going to say it's survival. Culturally, I will say it's identity. You mentioned earlier about people wanting to be Black but not wanting to be Black and wanting to look Black and sound Black. It's an identity. It's the first and the most powerful identity on this particular planet we're on now. So we do have that as a definition and something to identify ourselves with, because with colonialism and with separation and with us being spread out in many places, a lot of times we can lose the plot on what is our culture, what do we identify with. We even do it to ourselves sometimes. But I think that the sound and the music gives us an identity. When you hear reggae music, you think about something Jamaican or somebody, your grandmother's dish she made when you were a kid, because that's the thing that you assimilate to. You smell blueberry muffins, and that's before you go to church on Sunday, when you went to church, whether you were here in the city or you were down south or what have you. So there is that cultural identity where the sounds connect us with things our parents, our grandparents, and our great-grandparents exposed us to, for survival and for knowledge and information and for us to be whole as human beings.
Yeah. And I'm going to try not to show you too much extra bias, Will, because I'm such an affinity for the drummers. But I do want to expound on that a little bit before I move on to Allan. And thinking about that emotional connection, you talk about the tie to experiences you might have, or the tie to, the cultural roots of the actual music that we listen to. And so in what ways does that actually play a role in the way that you are portraying your instrument to the public? And where do you draw from, like when you're doing your teaching sessions or you're guiding the next generation? How do you connect that practice to its roots in the way that you're presenting the actual craft?
It's a great question. I do it in both ways. I'm a geek. I'm a technology geek. So it's very important for me to be in touch with young people and technology and what's happening with sampling music and looping music and creating beats and what's being downloaded. I love all of those things too. I'm a freak for technology. But I believe my education goes in both directions. I do want to learn a 40,000-year-old wedding beat. And I also want to know what the latest new drum machine is out now. So that's the way that I do it. So when I'm working with students and I'm educating people, I'm talking about both aspects, not beating anyone over the head. But it's very important when you're talking to younger people that you're speaking their language in a lot of ways. I have teenage children, so I hear a lot of things around the house. Sometimes I tease them and I'll say, man, what is that? Where's the chord changes in there? Whose cousin is singing? I'll say something sarcastic just to tease them, but they did grow up on Belafonte and Coltrane and Debussy and Miles and all of that other stuff. So, and on vinyl. So they understand the difference, but I just tease them, just a matter of, where music comes from when I was their age versus what they're listening to now. Yeah. Very important to approach them on their turf and don't alienate the thing. So I don't always inform the students, this is African, or this is from Nigeria, or this is from Haiti, because some people get intimidated. Some of us get intimidated when you say it on the bandstand. Yeah. So it's not important where it's from in terms of the sonic use. If it makes you feel good and it makes the music sound banging and we're getting to that next new phase, then that's important. We can talk about the history of it, maybe over coffee or something a little bit later. But I don't want to hit somebody with something because people have prejudices and people feel inferior about things or aren't inclusive. So you might say Haiti and somebody might go, whoa, hang on a minute, or Puerto Rico or Cuba or whatever. And I'd rather park that for now and put the pattern in their head, put the vibe in it, let them vibe on that. And then we can get to it later.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, Allan, culturally, emotionally, spiritually, how does Black music shape those experiences?
I wish I could crawl into Will's skin after that. Well, it was beautiful, baby. We all, as people of color, come from a legacy of a strong folk humming, screaming in pain, screaming in love, who stepped their foot over that barrier that gated that world that said that we don't want you here. Even though we say we were free and Abraham Lincoln, blah, blah, blah. And with that, we brought a commonality, and that was our song, our music, our love for the depth of what we're about as a people of color. Mm. And whether you travel from Edmonton, Canada, to LA, to Havana, to Puerto Rico, or to New York, or to Boston, there's a certain rhythm to our speech and to our language that Black children speak all the time. A child that says in Bedford-Stuyvesant, where you going, Ronnie? I'm fixing to go down to the store right now, and I'm right quick. You'll hear the same, tone and imagination of that picture he painted of him walking to that child in LA will be the same. Even though they're 1,000 miles apart, they will speak and talk and walk the same way. And that's a direct link to what we had to experience as pain on that place we call the plantation, where every strike of that whip brought out that scream that James Brown, ow, that scream, or that caress of that mother who squeezed us, that Abby Lincoln would cry about with Max Roach. That same sound is still alive today And that's what we're imparting upon these kids when we talk about not just history, we're talking about what's in them that they cannot run from and should not run from. And we expound upon that. And Will, you said it so beautifully. I don't want to regurgitate what you said, but it's so true. The sonic noise that they're listening to now, that we as the old school, the old guard, look and say, oh, stop playing that stuff right now. All they are an extension of those emotional pains, the emotional loves. They're just using it electronically, that's all. Mm-hmm. And as you say, I'm trying to grow because I'm around a lot of young cats right now, my band, and they'll bring things to the table that are not just foreign to me. I wouldn't say they're foreign. They're just not scratching that emotional thing that my grandmother and my Uncle Lee and the peach cobbler and the being down home in North Carolina or wherever it is we are. It just doesn't hit that, but we have to realize that it's in them. We just have to nurture it and bring it out for them. And the music they're creating now is an extension of that same sound that our forefathers made when they stepped off that plantation. That sound of, that sound, like I said, of James Brown, of Michael Jackson, that scream. So I'm now trying to harness that sound and couple it with these kids who are bringing this electronic music to the table. I'll say beforehand, maybe a couple of years ago, I would admonish them and sit down with them and say, oh, you got to listen to this. And they have. They listen to Coltrane, they listen to, you say, Debussy, they listen to Gershwin, they listen to Paul Robeson, they listen to W.C. Handy. But now I'm listening to what they're doing. I'm trying to get in bed with what they're about and bring my sounds of yore to what their sounds are. And together, I hope we're creating something that is coupling with our history as Black people and moving into the next dimension, which, as you said, Will, beautifully said. I love it. We talk about your children in the house and that. Because I have all these young folks coming over later on. And I'm trying to temper myself and grow with them and bring my knowledge of, and trying to bring my knowledge of their Black experience, rather than just beating them over the head. Remember the civil rights, Martin Luther King and Stokely Carmichael. And I'm trying to be a little more gentle with them because they understand where we come from. I'm trying to understand their pain. AIDS, the chemical influx of drugs into things that you and I weren't really privy to. We were privy to the dogs and the beating and the not drinking on the water fountains. We're not privy to what they're going through, the chemical things that they're going through. So the music now is reflecting in that. And I'm trying to couple what I have grown up with musically with what they are. And it's a two-way street. I'm learning what they're distributing to me and vice versa. Under the umbrella of the Black experience. I hope it wasn't long-winded on.
No, you're good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. And it actually intrigues me to think a little bit further about the shaping of the music through the pain that you expressed, right? Obviously, there's moments of joy that shapes music as well. Mm-hmm. But in a lot of cases, when you talk about, like, I never thought until you said that moment that James Brown's scream and yowl might have been connected to something that you don't normally hear, which is really connected to experience of pain or experience of just a sound that has been heard in a context that was a whole different context, right? And before James Brown and before certain artists came out, you didn't hear people screaming in their songs. You didn't hear people yelping in their songs or making certain sounds. So thinking about that is deep.
But we did hear it, and we're all old enough now. We heard those sounds at the feet of our grandmothers, of our great aunts, of our great uncles. We heard those sounds when we fell and cut ourselves, when we burnt our hand on the stove trying to reach for that piece of peach cobbler that we weren't supposed to have until dinner time. When your mama whooped your butt. I don't know if I should say that now, but when you get that butt whooping and you had to run to that one relative who would soothe you and protect you. We did hear those sounds. We heard those sounds of caress. We've heard those sounds of anguish. We've heard those sounds which we put into our music. Jackie Wilson put into his music, which help me out. Which we did hear those sounds. Right. We just packaged them in something that was user friendly to the white media. because they didn't hear those sounds.
Mhm.
And if they did hear those sounds, they heard them in a very perverse way. They could have
Mm.
us do dances in front of the cabins on Sundays on the plantation. They used to hear when they used to whoop us. They used to sit back and relish in the sounds, know that they're causing us pain. Because when they're causing us pain, that knows that we're alive and vibrant. Even to this day, in the music, when you go and see white audiences sit at a blues festival when there's only one or two black faces there, they want to hear those sounds because it makes them think, yeah, they're really doing something well. Oh, all those sounds come from us as a people stepping off that, hearing, looking at the pain of being hungry, running away through the marshes, working in the field, things that we try to mask. Because if we didn't show those signs of pain, then we weren't working hard enough for them.
Mhm.
So we put that into our music. And those who sold music from Stax to Motown to whatever, Possum Records, those who sold the most music, from Wilson Pickett and that, you use those sounds to send them out to their audiences. And it was like, yeah, they're doing good. See, that's how Black folks should sing all the time.
I have to recap what you just said. That was a moment right there. Because if they didn't hear those sounds of pain, then you weren't working too hard enough for them.
That's
So
right.
I want to launch from that a little bit into
how cruel can that be?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to launch from that thought into thinking about, kind of from the historical context, kind of bringing us a little bit closer to current, but thinking about the idea of sort of a musical safe spaces, right? And creating that sort of psychologically safe environment for people to express and to sort of communicate messages of hope. Now, this is going to sound a little off of the topic, so to speak, but I remember when my calculus professor as a freshman in college would play classical music, right, to accompany us with our exams. He had a belief, and I think it might have been even scientifically researched, that listening to classical music could improve your test scores and sort of help you relax and that sort of thing. And so when I think about Black music, right, it has caused an advance in us in ways that may have never been documented or researched in a way. So I'd love for you all to just think about, how did Black music bring us into today? In what ways did it transport us from, challenges we faced yesterday into the opportunities for today? So I'd love to hear, in your own personal experience, probably primarily, but just in general too, what ways have you seen Black music kind of carry us into new sort of portals? And so I'm going to switch the order around a little bit. So Will, I'd like you to respond first, and Beverly second, and then I'll come back to you, Allan, at the end.
Well, on a quick note, I'll answer the question quickly as possible. But on a quick note, I was part of an experiment. What does music taste like? With some professors from Ivy League schools reached out to me about putting music together, because the taste of wine, they were ironically the scientific experiments where certain tastes of wine, certain flavors triggered certain sounds. It was the equivalent of a French horn or a flute, or certain registers of sounds in the brain. So we did an experiment where we played certain types of music and then let them taste the wine after the music, and did it enhance it or not? 9 times out of 10 it did, but when you have wine connoisseurs, it's kind of difficult to get the real results on that. But it was an interesting experiment with just sound, taking race out of it for a second, just sound and taste and the results, what happens there. Get into your question, how has it, it's carried us. I'm from the Bronx, and I remember during the Reagan years when my brother and sister, I'm the youngest of 3, my brother and sister's generation had instruments at school. Everybody played something, a trombone, acoustic bass, French horn, flute, and you played in the band like you took science or math class. It wasn't separate kind of a thing. By the time I came around, the music was kind of not in the schools. I went to music schools. I went to Drummers Collective, downtown. I studied with Horace Arnold, jazz drummer, and, in Manhattan Plaza. I went to see Max or Blakey, whatever. It was different. I had to kind of go get to my sources. So it carried its way through in a way where I watched, I'm the generation right before, but I watched how the music was taken out of the schools and how the next generation who didn't have musical instruments as an influence. I was fortunate to be around, Steve Corner and Raven Chu lived there. I had people in my neighborhood that were already doing things that were kind of blowing up. So I saw it, and my parents put us in music schools. But for those colleagues of mine, friends that didn't take piano lessons, that didn't have a bass, didn't have Earth, Wind, and Fire blasting in their house on Saturdays or whatever, they went to the hip hop thing because there was no other outlet. Mm-hmm. So the turntable became the next Vance, putting a quarter on top of the turntable so you can actually scratch on it, putting tape and a quarter to it. And then this whole thing, in a whole term of break dancing and break beats, watching people dance to a song, but then when the break came on, they did something crazy. So the whole initiation of maybe we should just play the break in the song. And then that gives off another kind of energy than just playing the whole tune, all of these kinds of things. So it carried us, it educated us, it moved us forward. And rap became that next, hip hop and rap became that next, and graffiti, and Basquiat's work, all of that stuff all became our next generation of complaints and fighting for freedom and being who we wanted to be and wearing our hair, dreadlocks or mohawk, cornrows, whatever it is that you wanted to do. So like it's a weapon, to answer your question. Mm-hmm. How has it carried us? It carried us as a weapon. It defends us against things, and it also makes people back down or kind of comply with what we're doing because it's dope what we're doing. I think everything we do is dope, and maybe I'm biased, but that's just how I feel about it. But in a sense, it's a weapon, but not like a machine gun in a way. But it's a weapon in that we carry it with us, as our grandparents carried it with them. Our parents carry it. It is a weapon for us to speak poetry, play the bass, play the horn, improvise. Whether it's Ornette Coleman doing what he's doing, or it's Chuck D doing what he's doing, whatever it is, it's all of those things put together. So yes, it does have that kind of an impact with us. But I'll answer it by using it for me in my own life as a weapon, because I've been places with Living Color where people will ask me, "Why are you playing this music?" And that told me that this journalist was uneducated, because Black people invented rock and roll. Yeah. So why shouldn't I be playing this music? But I know racially, if we were playing reggae or we were a hip hop band or we were a funk group, that journalist would feel more comfortable interviewing us, because the rock idiom has kind of been kidnapped and put into a position where they're comfortable with saying, if you ask a young child to close his eyes, at least in the 80s and early 90s, what does a rock guitarist look like? They'll say torn jeans, blonde hair, blowing in the wind, holding a Fender Strat. That's not my definition of rock and roll at all. Never was. So I was shocked when I was 20-something years old and I went out and people were like, "Why are you?" I was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? What possibly could you be talking about? But I realized the reality of it. So yes, defense, a weapon for me, clarity, safe haven, and it's my reality. If I'm not doing this, I'm not being Will Calhoun. I'm not being a Black man. I'm not being African. I'm not being any of those things if I'm not dealing with my art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Will, it's funny because you described, and my colleague put in the comments, very similar the way that art had transformed and it was like a weapon. It's similar to the story of Capoeira in Brazil, right? Similar.
Yes, it was that used. That was a form, whatever you want to say. I mean, all the slavery is bananas. The Portuguese weren't as tight on Africans, maybe as the British or the French were. So they were able to practice this in places like Bahia and Recife and Olinda and these towns in Brazil, where they were able to do this martial art thing and learn how to use it as an escape tool, which is why when Africans were brought to America, they were like, don't give them anything. Don't give them any drums. Don't let them do anything, because they are aware of the power of what those things are. So when we didn't have the drums, we beat on something else. The banjo really comes from Africa. Really, it's connected to the kora and other instruments from West Africa, and that got reinvented. The drum set is a 250 so odd old year instrument or so. We know that the batas and the djembes and all of these other and the batas from Nigeria. So I know there's a Cuban bata, but the Nigerian batas, and these things were all pieces that came to New Orleans and then became the marching pieces and became actually a kind of like a new instrument in a way. But that's what I mean by weapon and survival, is that we take all of those things. And I just saw examples of it. I was in Mali with some elders, and a balafon master that I was dying to meet, and I finally met him, and he was playing me some music, and he said, you know, we really like Jimi Hendrix's Band of Gypsies band. And I said, oh, really? What? They said, yeah, he was playing Malian music. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is going to be educational. And this old man started playing me traditional Malian songs that sounded like Machine Gun a little bit, or Power of Soul. And it was deep. And it made me think, did Jimmy know what he was doing? Or it was one of those moments where I was frozen, because it was a different piece of music and it had another kind of a vibe. But immediately I got the goose pimples, because it reminded me the first time I sat down and put on the New Year's Eve record, or you know, or Axis Bold as Love, or what have you. So like that kind of a power is what I mean, you know, in terms of that connection of it. But that's in a nutshell. I mean, for me, it's weaponized. It's necessary weaponization.
Yeah.
How I want to put it. And it doesn't mean anything evil in a way, but it does mean survival and intelligence and intellectualism and love and passing it on. You talked about young people. You know, they have to see that we're passionate. They have to see that we love it. The young folks know when you're fronting. They know. They know. If you tell, oh, I like Train, and you don't really like Train, when you put it on, they're gonna look at you like he doesn't really like this music. They know. So you can't front on them, and you shouldn't. So it's very important that as a weapon, it represents you and what you do and what your mom gave you and what your grandma gave you and what uncle and auntie and everybody else. So that's the important combination piece.
That's good. That's really good. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Beverly, I'd love for you to expound how, talk about this transporting power of Black music in your life.
I'm listening to Will. And when you were saying the journalist, when you get to that part and you get to the part where, you know, it's weaponizes you. I was not given that performance, you know, drop in my DNA, but in my household, and my dad was always Jimmy Smith. He was always playing this cat, that cat. You know, we're right in the heart of Harlem. And he would have red vinyl records. And I would say, what is that? And then he would play, you know, all types of music. And my mother, Dinah Washington. And it's so interesting. It just became a part of who I was, because you know what Diana Washington was on. That was chore day. So everybody knew what to do. But we grew up in a house where we listened to music. And it wasn't just for us to just snap our fingers, but we would talk about it. My father and I would just talk about the music he was listening to. And I never knew where it would take me. I couldn't play music. My brother could sing whatever, but we would always talk about music. And then as I grew up, and then I felt that, well, you know, I couldn't play, but people need to know about this music. Because I'd run into people as I went to college and went in the city. It's like, well, why are they playing that? Well, what is that music? And then I said, that's what I'll do. I'm the person that should start educating these individuals who became the journalists. You know, I had a lot of people that were in writing, English major. And they would say, well, what do you know about this music? And I would then talk to the musicians and get that information and give it back to them, because it had to be broken down. And as I grew and went into public relations, I never thought I would go into PR at a label where all of the artists I worked with initially were older than me. They were my father's, you know, the music he loved to listen to. But there was a gentleman, Bruce Lundvall, who was the head of Blue Note label at the time. And he would always just talk about jazz music. And I would stand there, and I was probably an assistant, and just glean off of the information. That way I could go home and talk to my father about all these jazz artists. And he would call them that cat and that cat. And he would tell it, you know, talk about where music came from. And as I grew in that knowledge, it was knowledge in all the other genres of music that were Black music. I took it in, And then I would be able to talk to, the journalists would come up, and Will even said it. They would come up, well, what is that? I would have, and at that time was Black Beat magazine, and I would talk to these, and I'm younger, and you talk to these writers on, well, what is that sound? But then you had those that really wanted to get into the history of the music, really delve into what music is saying and what it means to those that, the Black musicians that are playing this music, and it's not just, I grew up at a time where it was hip hop was the first, but it was all the other instruments that came in, music that was, from, Spain. I worked with a lot of artists that were from Europe, and they would come over, and it would be the sound that was here that they would have, And there were writers, because I was in a department that was called special markets. What do you think that means? That's okay. Special markets. But it was music, it was Black music, and it was interesting because then all of a sudden you'd look at the roster and you'd have a white artist that you're working because it's the sound that they were making. So what it did for me, it just kept growing me as a person that was in communications. And I never thought I would be teaching at a college where I'm teaching the fundamentals of speech. And my students will come into each of my classes, and I will have music playing. And I'll never forget, I played a song, Arrested Development, for one of the students. She had no idea. And the song was it was Tennessee. There were songs that they never heard. And then in one of my classes last semester, I would come in and play the music. And I'll tell you, it just brought me, I had to sit back. One of my students said to me, Professor Page, you know what song I've been listening to lately? Donald Byrd, Cristo Redento. And I said, I'm telling you, he's 17 to 18 years old. I said, really? He said, yes. He said, you know what? No matter how dark it gets, he said, when I listen to that beautiful song that, this beautiful people, we still have hope. So that is where I believe I am, or how I came up in music, where now it's not only teaching it, I still do the, public relations, but I communicate, and I feel that artistry, we have to give something back. You have to take, and give something back, not just throwing it to the community, but taking a profit that we make and utilize it for not so much a nonprofit, because I don't believe that you just keep throwing money. I think that, with anything, you have to take people out of poverty. That's not do nonprofit. That's another conversation, I know. But in terms of music, and I still do it to this day, I play the music before my classes. And my audience, I'll say my audience, my students are very different. And some of them not even into music. But I feel that those that do talk about it, it's no way for me or anyone else. It's their dream, and it's what they see. But the young man that came with the Donald Byrd and the Cristo Redento, and I looked at him, and he said, that's something, because he's interested in music. And I said, that's what you need. It's the hope. And I believe that's where it comes out of me. And I still talk music, even though it's, the fundamentals of speech, and it's key.
Yeah, that's key. I love that story. And I love that, first of all, just you talk about the special markets and the code words that are used around the Black lived experience. And we know it's such a psychological warfare on us as a community and society to always label anything that's related to Black as special, different, whatever, other, diverse, all these words we use, right, as categories to describe when they really trying to say Black people. So I appreciate your transparency for that. But also too, that's a great song, the Donald Byrd song. We'll put that on the chat. I'm going to encourage those who are watching to go ahead and start asking your questions and giving us the feedback, because I have a feeling that I'm not going to get through much more than maybe 3 questions, and we'll probably get to talk all day. And so I do want to encourage the audience to interact with us and thinking about this. One thought that I believe was shared already in one of the chats was about the impact of that movie, the show called The Breakdown on Netflix, which was about these young kids who were, at the beginning of the hip hop culture in the Bronx, and how they were part of the, creating the break beat and using DJing to interact with the music and interact with the rhyme. And so it's an interesting, thought that I think the audience would love for you all to riff on. But just thinking about what you've said, and I love, Allan, you to build on that in your own way about the transportation and the power of how music transports us. I think about Beverly, your experience. Beverly, you talked about just interacting with so many different artists who have this sort of power, and using even the music of the artist to create an ambiance in the room for those who are walking in, right? So, Allan, when you're thinking about your personal experience of the transportation that music provides us, I'd love you to just not only reflect on your own experience, but just thinking about how do we leverage those experiences even going forward today? In a lot of ways, when I hear music today, I hear a lot of the same beats. I hear a lot of the same rhythms. I hear what sometimes appears to be almost thoughtlessness in a way, that I might be judging in a way that generations before me judged my music. I don't know if I'm perpetuating a cycle, but just love to hear how you think music has transported you, and how that informs us today. Okay.
What they will say, oh, my mind is going through them changes. I will go on that later. I remember going to Mr. Cook's barber shop in Brooklyn. I get my hair cut, and we didn't have much money. So what Mr. Cook would do was he'd have you sign a book, and he'd sign your book, and then later on your mother would come in and pay at the end of the week. And that was at the grocery store and everywhere else. But in the barber shop, they have a phonograph player, and they'd play all the music from Coltrane to the Ozzy Brothers to Motown, and you sit there and get your hair cut, and you'd weave back and forth, and you listen to everyone play. And then I'd go uptown to my aunt's restaurant in Harlem. She had a restaurant called Kate's Soul Food, which is right around the corner from the Apollo. And if you look at Jimmy Smith's album, Home Cooking, he's in front of it, my aunt's restaurant, Home Cooking. Mm-hmm. And I used to sit there and see all the stars come in and order their food and that, and some of the legends. And you just sit there as a little kid and watch them. And they would expound upon the industry. Some had some bitterness, some didn't, the love of it, the audience. I'm gonna circle this back around in a minute. And I was just learning how to play guitar, and my Aunt Theodosia gave me my first guitar, and I was 10 years old. My mother didn't want me to play guitar. She's a pianist. She said, you're not gonna play that music, boy, and sit on a stump, and not in my house. That's, old school. So my aunt used to keep it up in her closet. My mother would go to work, and I'd come home from school and play it. My mother come home and hide it. She found it anyway. That was another story. It was raining. It was torrential rains, and I was coming home and from school, and I walked past Mr. Cook's barber shop, and I remember standing in the rain and looking up at the big plate glass window of the barber shop, and there was a picture of this man of color with a big fro, with a psychedelic headband and an all-white fringed leather jacket, these tight velvet pants with silver contours on them, playing this left-handed white Stratocaster guitar, looking out on a sea of people, white, black, Asian, Latin, and they all were just with their mouth open applauding this man as if he was wielding a weapon in front of them, a powerful man. Now bear in mind, as a child of color, a boy of color, the only people that I really knew who wielded that sort of power, my father, the preacher, Sidney Poitier, or Jim Brown running down the field. Other than that, it was either Step and Fetch It or Amos and Andy. That was our characters as a man of color. So I remember watching, leaned out of the window and said, boy, I remember this to this day. It was a defining moment in my life. So what are you doing? I said, because wafting out of the door of the barbershop was don't.
Oh, wow.
And I sat there enthralled. I never heard anything like that in my life. I never did. And I pointed up at it and he said, yeah, that's Jimi Hendrix. Come on in. I was dripping wet. And there was Mr. Green, Mr. Armstrong there, Mr. Jackson. All these men were sitting around who were there every day. And they were looking at the album cover. And they said, I knew him when he was with King Curtis. Another guy said, I knew him with the Ozzy Brothers. And he went over there to London now playing that white boy shit. I remember saying that. And they threw the album cover at my feet in the doorway. And I ran and picked it up. It was like I was a kid on a plantation picking up sweets from the master. I remember picking that album cover up, looking at it, and he said, you want that? I said, yes. I took it home. I learned every lick on that song. That empowered me. That watching that man of color sway those people, which in turn embedded in my mind that is the power that I must have. Yes, I can learn languages, I can go to school, I can make a lot of money, but nothing is more powerful than this sound of this music that is inside of me, because he moved the world with it. He moved the world with it. And that's what I caught from that rainy day as that little boy. I was maybe, I don't know how old was I? Maybe, I think I was 11 years old at the time. I remember sitting there in the rain, and that empowered me to the point, to this day, I still get chills when thinking of that cold day in September, listening to that record, watching all these older Black men admonish this man of color, Will, that stage in front of this eclectic group of people. And I think that was one of the most defining moments of my life that moved me on to who I am today, that made me pursue this career of music and imparted upon not my audience, but my loved ones, that it was more powerful than, and Will and Beverly and Shawn, and we have been around people of means, I'm sure. We've been around multimillionaires, we've been around people who don't have a pot to piss in, as they say. But nothing is more valuable and more important in life than what we give them musically. And that I found out is my biggest against the foibles of life, whether it's through white or Black or whatever it is. That has shown me. Well, that's my story.
I am moved by that story for many reasons, but especially because to Will's point and your point, and Beverly kind of alluded to this as well, you know, I can hear that voice of that older Black gentleman who threw that record at you and said, oh, he's over there, Jimmy's over there playing that white boy shit, right? And not even knowing the connection of rock and roll to our legacy, our history, and the power that he was able to wield as a guitarist, because whether he knew it or not, connecting to something that's very deep and of the soul and ethereal. It's not even just something you can tangibly describe, but it's something of an emotion and a feeling that is perpetuated and communicated deeper than we know. And so I think about like our audience, right now. I'm thinking about these young people who are maybe seeing and hearing some of these names for the first time, right? And so part of the reason why we even have these forums is just exposure. It's access, it's exposure. And just the way that barbershop gentleman or whoever that guy was who threw that record at you, who did not know the history of ourselves, this moment for us is also helping our young people know the history of themselves. And so when I think about just a question that I've heard from the audience that I want to read, and this comes from a person who is, I believe, the president of Love Production Records. And they asked a question: what are the panelists' thoughts about the popularity of Black music in the world, yet the difficulty of Black jazz artists face what they face in this country to be heard and to be revered like they are in foreign countries like Europe, or continents like Europe or foreign countries. And a lot of times we know sometimes the person is not revered in their own home. They're revered so away more than they are back in their own home. So Beverly, I'd love to just launch with you first and then maybe come back to Allan and then Will. We're just thinking about, you know, what does it mean? And I'll just say it again. What are your thoughts about the popularity of Black music in the world, yet the difficulty of the Black artists, especially jazz artists, being revered here as they are in Europe and other places? Now,
what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it. I hear what your question is, but listening to Allan and to Will, and I was just, as Allan was talking, and then he just goes down to in terms of, you know, where you love this music so much and my role. And I put myself where those were the artists. And jazz was the first genre of music that, and I don't say thrown into, but that's where I was placed, doing all this jazz publicity. And I felt this is what people need to know about. And as a publicist, what you do as a marketing specialist or professional, you want people and the writers to let the people know who these artists are. And that's where I felt, and I guess some of my cohorts will also say, that was the fight. I wanted people to know about the Will Calhouns, the Allan Harrises, the Herbie Hancocks. This is the music you should be writing about, because we dealt with the writers and all the media. And that's how you get the word out. And it became, it was not so much a fight, but it was the passion of these artists that you wanted the people to know about, because you have to feel what they're feeling. And when you write about it, and you would have to fight. There were writers that you could, really get through to at the New York Times. But you could go to him, you need to talk about Living Color. This is the interview you need on the front page. This is who people need to hear about. And not just, oh, well, it's a great record, it's on the charts. No, you need to tell people the history of this music. Mm-hmm. And that's what I felt was, that was my obligation. And I'll tell you, and it just makes me a little emotional, because there were artists that I represented that it would take almost 6 months to a year before people would even write about them. And then they would come back to you and they would sit down, and Will and Allan and, tons of other artists, you realize that, and Will especially, would tell me about your music, and that's what my role was. And I feel that there's still a space for women and men as marketing specialists, that represent artists that are, performing jazz and Black music.
Yeah, it's powerful. Wow, it's incredible too, given the cachet of the people you've represented, that would still take a year for people to. Yeah. It's incredible. It's so ridiculous. And so, Allan, please expound on that. And Beverly, if you're able to get Pat to connect with us as well, I'll just send you a note. Okay. Allan, please expound.
Yes. Prior to the internet, the face of the Black musician, the Black artist, male or female, was filtered through the lens of the media that controlled us.
That's right.
So if a large amount of people, children, whether it's from Poland or Sweden or Italy or Israel, and that, if they grew up watching Good Times and moving on up, and their music was based upon the pantomime, I don't want to go. Yeah, I'll go deep. What the hell? I love this, Shawn. I'm glad that we're here. I'm going to go deep. and Will and Beverly, please send me a rope so I can crawl out of this hole I'm about to dig myself in. Yes, as an artist, and Will can attest to this, prior, maybe 10, 15 years ago, prior to that, going to the overseas, you basically had to start your shows out giving them what they see in the media. And a lot of times the media is run by the white establishment. And I'm not talking about color-wise. It could be Black, the headset. So what you needed to do prior to you getting to the meat of your show was based upon what they filtered, what they put out first before you were there. But now the internet has opened up the floodgates. Now that child in Stockholm or in Paris or in Budapest, they can actually see what that man is playing in Mississippi in that back juke joint, or what Will is playing in his classes in the Bronx. So they're hungry now for the real music that you are playing, rather than just the regurgitated sounds that make money that your record company wants you to do on that tour. So it empowers us, not for the sake of empowering us, we're going to take over in that. It empowers us that we now can express ourselves that our forefathers in our industry could not. The Sidney Becheys and the Duke Ellingtons even the Miles, which he became bitter because of that, which they could not. They could not play what they would in their own confines with their own people. They had to play what made money for the record companies. What did Duke Ellington say to his record company when they dropped him? They said to him, Mr. Ellington, we're going to have to drop you. Why? Well, because you're not selling records. He turned to them and said, well, I thought that was your job. My job was to make music. Now that floodgate is open now, the internet and social media has enabled us to live our life the way we are behind closed doors. We can do that on the stage all around the world now. We don't have to pantomime anymore. We don't have to do, you know what, Allan, you got to do a lot more blues in your set. You really do. I mean, I like what you're doing, Allan, but it's nice, but you need to do some of that blues stuff you did at that one place. That's what I hear. Well, I'm not ready for that. I want to do my new project. There's a wonderful documentary right now I saw it on Netflix where Ira Gitlin and them are talking to Abby Lincoln in a room with Max Roach. And he actually says, you're a little bit too Negroid for them, Abby. You really are. That's gone now. The internet has opened that up. So it's empowered us. I wouldn't say it's weaponized us because using a weapon means that you want to hurt someone. We don't want to hurt anyone, which we haven't for 400 years. If we haven't hurt them by now, I don't know what the hell. We want to embrace them. And that's what enabled us is this, I'll use weapon. The weapon that we do have is our love of this music, and we want to share it. And we just don't want to share it under their confines. We want to do it based upon what we've experienced. And Will said it wonderfully, this rap and hip hop has actually enabled us to do that. So I'm gonna leave it at that.
That's good. That's really good stuff. And I think about, well, first of all, I'm going to find this Netflix documentary, so I'm excited about. What was it called again?
I have to look at it. It's wonderful. It shows Lena Horne, Abby Lincoln, Nina Simone. We know where all that goes, Okay. But it's really there's one segment in there where they're in a room after she did that record, Freedom. What is the record, Will? The
Freedom Now, Sweet.
What is it?
Freedom Now, Sweet.
That's it. Yeah, and they wouldn't promote it. They would not promote it. There were companies in the room. There's about 4 or 5 critics in the room with her. And they're actually stripping away, not just her sisterhood, they're trying to strip away her humanity. It's
Correct.
It's horrible. But Max stands up for her, but still that's not even enough. You could see the admonishment and the look on Abby's face as she's crumbling in front of them, trying to explain to them, this is what I want to do. This is what I need to say. And they're actually looking at her and saying, well, what you're saying isn't good enough because it's not Negroid enough, Abby. Mm-hmm. It's really heartbreaking. Watch it, and you better have a tissue by your side.
Mm-hmm.
By your side.
Yeah. Is it called The Birth of Cool? Does that sound familiar?
I'm going to look it up because I saw it the other day.
Okay. We'll find it.
And I'll jettison it to you when
yeah.
It's very movement. It's very. You understand, not just as a Black male, you understand what our sisters had to go through.
Yeah.
It's very powerful. I mean, we of course, as men, we go through a lot, but what our women had to go through is tantamount almost to being a chattel. It's really, really heartbreaking.
Yes, you're preaching. And I mean, just thinking, getting access in the first place to be able to make a record. And then on top of that, dealing with the double sort of marginalized, position and having very little power. So, our Black women, shout out to what they've endured, even beyond a lot of times what we have endured as men, to be able to pursue their own career and dreams. I'm moved by that sentence and you said about just not Negroid enough, right? What are some places where we're still trying to just be fully ourselves, but it's not Black enough? And as you said, Allan, it's not just white people who are perpetuating this idea. It's the system of whiteness that can be perpetuated by any color, by any person, right? So understanding how those systems are still in place because of whatever person believes this represents the Black voice, this represents the white voice, this represents men and women, whatever demographic we're talking about. So I want to turn over to you, Will, to just expound a little bit as well on that and kind of where do we go with that?
Well, a couple of things I want to say up front, and I appreciate highly what both panelists elegantly stated. We have young people we're talking to, and there's something when it comes to people of color, which I don't kind of like using that phrase, but when it comes to our youth, we have to be careful about language. And a lot of times we get into talking about slavery and what slavery meant. And I think it's very important. I'm just going to say this. I'm not saying this towards anybody here. I'm just saying it's very important for the young people to discover, learn, listen to what happened thousands of years before slavery. That's so important. There's more money in that bank than the bank that we're looking at right now. There's more information in that bank. There's more love in that bank. There's more power in that bank. That's the bank you got to pull from and study from as your main source or your main weapon before you start dealing with where we are now. You're not going to be able to resolve it if you're only going to deal with the bank we're looking at the moment, because it's criminal and it doesn't allow us to have an opportunity to shine and to come out from some of these things that you're stating. So I'm just going to say that because of my own personal research I've done. It was so much more powerful to learn the music and languages and food and things about us. So I personally, artistically, even in terms of writing music and performing it for the people, can deal with it in a I think in a more realistic, solvable way. Now, I'm not judging what Allan had to do with anybody else was dealing with. Live in Color, we said F that. We're gonna look like we look, we're gonna play what we play, and if you don't like it, then that's too bad. I didn't think the record was gonna blow up the first album the way it did. Not to say that those systems were not still in place, of course they were. But I thought it was gonna take 10 albums before, in Beverly's point, I thought it was gonna take us 10 records before anybody was gonna pay any attention to Live in Color, because we went into it with the love and the passion of Max and Abby and Ornette and Train and George Clinton and so many of those other people, and B.B. King. All of these people I've sat down with on the couch and I've talked to about very heavy things racially that got nothing to do with their genius and their talent. So we were kind of on the, well, by the time we got to where we were like, well, yo, we're just gonna have to just hit this and deal with it. So we kind of went into it in that kind of combat, freedoms, fearlessness stance. But I also want to talk about, you brought up jazz, and I think it's really important that we understand, people should know what that word means, where it came from, how it was coined, not that it has to deal with us, because it kind of really doesn't. I don't want to get too political on that now, but I know it was spelled differently and it was used more as a term of Europeans or white folks looking at us and not knowing what we were doing, so that we were kind of wadding off, jazzing off, kind of was like a term that slid into what it actually became. Maybe that's not but we can debate that, not now, but another time. But people should look into titles too. I'm talking to our younger audience and what things mean to you and how the definition is perceived. So the whole thing about us doing our music and doing our thing and having people say, because Allan is right, people have said to me, even why are you playing the Nigerian clay drum in the jazz context? It's music, black music. Why not? Why does that have to be? I don't have to only play a four-piece kit and wear dinner socks and a suit and tie and just get up there and play standards. What does that mean to me? So if people have a hard time with it, I don't make it my problem. That's my N-word for my children. It's navigation, not the other N-word. How are you going to navigate yourself through those kind of situations and overcome those things? So that's kind of a very, very important part. And Beverly's piece is very deep because, she's an educated journalist, and there's so many that I ran into that just aren't. They don't know how to ask you about Black music or about the history or about Haiti or about some things could come off. The person might be a nice person, but could come off very dark way with someone asking you something. Why are you playing rock? Whose idea was it? Sometimes people would say, "Do you guys all get in a room and just decide this would be a cool thing to do?" Black and white. So that piece is very, 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 very important. That and with having young people on here, I just want to really, really stress that piece. That they have to get to that piece. They have to live with it and invest in it, because you're not going to get to your art, in my opinion, in any healthy, economically sound, brilliant way if you don't do that. In my opinion, that's just my opinion. Maybe you can I just think that bank is the bank we have to look at and study and review and invest in. And it will help us deal with some of the things both Allan and Beverly were talking about.
Yeah, love that. That's so good. That's such a good wrap up. And so I just want to acknowledge quick, we have someone in the room that's joining us as a surprise guest. And so Miss Angela Winbush-Isley is here. I'm so glad you're here. I'm not sure if you're available on video, but so happy to have her here. Beverly, thank you for making the connection, and I appreciate it. And Angela, we've been having an incredible conversation with these legends, and I know you are one of them, talking about just the journey that Black music has taken us on. As you may know or may not know, the CUNY Black Male Initiative, which is the program supporting this event, supports thousands of students who are possibly hearing for the first time many names of artists and some of the panelists who are contributed to the journey that Black music has transported us on through social crisis, through generations of pain and also joy. And so we only have about 15 minutes left, but I'd love to hear your perspective about just the journey that music has taken us on, taken you on. You have obviously done some amazing things in your career, selling over 10 million albums, writing and penning songs for Sheena Easton's Gold album back in the day, for doing a ton of great work with obviously, Ron Isley, obviously, and just all the work that you've been doing over the years has been really quite incredible. Even working with Janet Jackson is one of my personal all-time favorites. So we know you have a crazy history and catalog, but I'd love to hear just a little bit about your journey of how Black music has transformed our communities in times of social crisis and gotten us through those tough moments. And what has it meant for you so that our young people who are watching this can be inspired and also educated about how we use Black music to really help us navigate and to deal with some of the traumas that we have endured from generation to generation. So first, just tell people who you are, Angela, and give your excerpt for a few minutes, and love to just say thank you and welcome for being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shawn. I am Angela Winbush-Isley, and I'm a producer, singer, songwriter, and an educator as well. I teach at and mentor at NYU remotely, and love my students. What I would say about Black music is, as a female, from my perspective, it's always been an uphill journey. And for me, I think the Black music has evolved, but still had the same message. It empowers us, it educates us, it enlightens us when we're under the water, which now we're politically oppressed, and the policies don't work for us. The music always overcomes, because the language of music has no compartment. Back in the day, they would put us in a compartment and put us in a little box, but music is bigger than that. Being a female producer, I knew that there were going to be young women coming behind me, and I took a lot of hits, but a lot of women before me took a lot of hits. And what I would say is, young people, you need to know your history, because you don't know where you're going unless you know where you've come from. And that's a very important thing. And then the other thing is ownership. I own my publishing. You have to retain ownership, and don't put things on social media without the simple thing of a copyright, because there is, I want to say it nicely, but there are piracy writers and piracy producers, and they will, even the people around you, if they said and they were just in the studio, they want a piece of your song. And your songwriting catalog and your publishing catalog is going to be your retirement, because you have to create some ancillary income. And there's no retirement in entertainment. Now, understand, your parents may not understand what you're doing. My students, Latino X, Black, some of them are from England, some of them are Asian Americans, and their parents don't understand. They're studying engineer. Oh, what is that you do? Well, I told them, I said, Stevie Wonder hired me and I had a degree. And my folks still ask me, Stevie, who now? What work do you do? And I was like, oh my God, yes, I have a job in entertainment, but they never could define it until they actually saw the results. But the result isn't to make money, it is to make history and make good product that's going to outlive you. Because whatever you make, you're going to live with it for the rest of your life. And you're making history right now. You and I, all these wonderful people. Beverly Page dragged me on without makeup. I'm sorry, I look so crazy. But, you know,
Look great.
it was important for me to come on and say, you must own yourself. You must keep retaining a piece of yourself, even if you have to give it up, but do it on your terms. Know your history. Know who came before you so that you can know where you're going, because that always anchored me. My family's name is on Ellis Island. All my family is listed on Ellis Island. For me to understand who I am as a Bayesian, American, African-American civil rights child who marched with my parents, who marched with Dr. King, that infused everything and informed my music. Am I talking right? Or is there an amen? I need amen.
Amen.
Okay.
Amen.
So you can't know where you're going. Even Latino, I tell them, study your history.
Yes.
Study the people that came before you from South America. Listen, America did not belong to the Caucasian community. They also are immigrants. So there is no minor or major. There's minor surgery, there's major surgery. There's a minor chord and there's a major chord, but there is not a minority when you infuse that with human experience. There's no minor human, so you are not a minority. And I work from that premise to build their self-esteem. Yeah. No such thing.
Yeah, I love that. That's you preaching. You are preaching. And so you actually referenced something Will was talking about earlier about knowing your past to inform your future. And so you're not caught up and thinking that only what's true is what's going on right now and today. So as sort of a last thought, I'd love for you all to just share with us two things. Number one, what are your top, say, 3 to 5 playlist items you think every person who is between the age of 18 and 30 should hear, listen to? It could even be a piece of literature or a documentary or movie or something, but what would you give as a sort of your playlist to kind of take us out so that we can start adding these to our catalog and share that with our community, and we'll compile that going forward. So yeah, we will go one at a time to do that. I see you holding up Notes of Native Son from James Baldwin, a classic for sure. And then secondly, just where can we find you? How can we follow you? How can we support your art? So we'll kind of close off with that one at a time, and then we'll be done for our time together today. So since you've already held up a piece of work, Angela, give us your top 3 to 5 or your top 1 if that's all you want to talk about.
I think we should know our great speakers. We knew Maya Angelou, but the kids don't know James Baldwin. They don't know that intelligence preceded us. Notes of a Native Son, read his writings, go on YouTube like they do when they search us, because my kids searched me. They were like, wow, we didn't know you could perform. We didn't know you had a choreographer. We didn't know you had dancers. You have to know what our intelligence level. We had a mental acuity and IQ before they told us we had that. We were kings and queens before we were ever over here. And we have to understand, we built the pyramids. Obviously, I started in architecture. You know why? Because that is my innate DNA. I know how to build things. And now I did not know I was going into music. I know how to build songs. So I would say Dr. King, James Baldwin. I would say learn Aretha Franklin. They'll say who, we have students that don't know who Magic Johnson is, because they weren't even born in the Michael Jordan era. So,
So true.
We have to go back, study how Motown started. Study so that when you build your company, you know what comes with it. You don't have to always be the preacher or the entertainer. You can be the publisher. You can be the promoter. You can promote shows. You can do copyright law. You can do transactional law. I know I'm preaching and I'm talking too much, but other areas, you can be a stylist. You can be artist management, a sports management. This is what I've told my grandchildren. you don't have to be LeBron, because everybody's not going to be LeBron and Steph Curry.
LeBron got a
But
chef, LeBron got a lawyer.
Manage him, 20% of his income is
That's
still
right.
nice.
That's right.
You know, it's the compass between Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon. Ed McMahon was number 2, but his checks were big.
Yep. You preach. A little bit of a lot is still a lot. I love that word. It's a good word. All right, I'm going to go to Allan. Allan, give me your top 3 to 5. What you got? Oh, also real quick, Angela, where can we follow you? Where can we support you?
Oh, Twitter, Angela Winbush-7, Instagram, The Angela Winbush, and Facebook is easy to find because all 3 of them are connected. I have an Angela Winbush fan page, and I have The Angela Winbush, my actual page. So everybody so far can find me. As old as I am, folk are still following.
We will follow you. Your spirit carries on for sure.
Thank you.
Allan, please share. You got to unmute for us. There you go.
I'm just still trying to get over the thing about Angela Winbush being here. Because I had that album cover when she came out in them shit with that.
Listen, be quiet.
Girl.
Listen, I'm 66 now.
Don't look how pretty you are. Don't even go there. I'm not even flattering you. I'm just telling you what it is. God bless you, dear. And I'm so glad that just your knowledge of the world and the way you sing and the way you produce and write songs. I love you. And I'm gonna leave it at that. Now let me go into my little thing. We don't own airports. We don't own hospitals. We don't own country. Look, the only thing we have is the power to make people sit and watch us do what we do and to share it. But we give it away all the time. Angela, you said something so poignant when you said we have to have our publishing. We have to have these things because we give it away. Maybe it's because we're taught to turn the other cheek, to share, to love thy neighbor, which is wonderful, but it's also bitten us in the butt because our white counterparts, for some reason during their formation of the earlier part of the last century, they didn't teach their children that. They taught their children this thing: this is mine and that's theirs, and don't let them know how much you have, blah, 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 blah. That's what they were taught. I hope we never lose that about ourselves. That's our beauty. That's what's lasted us for 400 years of getting our butt whooped. So here we are, these beautiful people. We've not crumbled. I don't think any other race of people on this continent could have done that. So on that note, what are the things that I'm going to impart? The records and that book by James Baldwin is one of my favorites. Frederick Douglass, The Lesson of Frederick Douglass. Slipping on that ship in Maryland, teaching himself how to read, escaping becoming a slave, from being a slave to abolitionist. Frederick Douglass. I can go on from there, but everything in my mind stems from what he did. And it wasn't done from anger, Nat Turner. It wasn't done from coercion. It wasn't done from preaching on the pulpit. He did it with his actions, Frederick Douglass. And my lessons were taught from him, of course, from others, but he was my anchor.
Yeah. Now,
as far as listening to music, I'm going to stroke my friend here because I went to see years ago a friend of mine, a white friend of mine, a good counterpart, a hell of a guitar player. I learned a lot from him. He comes from the school of Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck and that. He said, we got to go see this group. I said, oh man, I'm off for the night. This was years ago. We got to see this group play. What they do? Rock. I said, look, man, come stop. I saw House of the Holy. I've seen Mick Jagger. I've seen Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. What rock? He said, just keep your mouth shut and just come. I said, all right. So I went down to the place to see this band. I got up and there these brothers stepped on stage. Bam! And the drummer swaying back and forth to start this big backbeat, like Bill Buford on the drums. For those who don't know who Bill Buford is, look him up. I'm not going to tell you. Keith Moon, you probably know. And he was just playing his ass off. And then this hot guitar player came on and started doing all these incredible Stevie Vai sort of licks. And this wild, young, robust singer got on stage doing these protest songs in the guise of rock and roll. And then last but not least, with this lovely brother with dreadlocks playing this hip hop rock funk sound on the bass. His name was Doug. namesake, of course, Doug Winbush. And I sat there for an hour with my mouth open. I looked over at my white counterpart and he said, I did a talk the day before about white rock and all that. And he wanted to show me a lesson, and he did. And I have to give my shout out to him. His name was Robert. My shout out. And Will, I want to say that was a wonderful evening I had. It opened my eyes to so much. So I thought prior to that time that I saw Jimi Hendrix in that window, all the way up to the funk era, Angela, you were part of that, of course, all through the funk era, the 80s going on, I felt that we had fallen off the wagon as far as rock was concerned. You brought it back in my mind and my heart, Will. So I'm going to throw it out to everyone who's listening. If you're not experienced Living Color live, then shame on you. So I'm going to leave it at that note. And Shawn, God bless you. Elizabeth, God bless you. Angela, everyone, thank you for being a part of this wonderful pantheon of color. Thank you.
Amazing. Allan, where do we follow you? Where do we support your work?
AllanHarris.com. I do a Harlem After Dark here every Tuesday, 7:30. I have an eclectic blend of musicians come in. My Facebook, the Allan Harris Band. I'm on Twitter at Allan Harris. I'm everywhere, you know. And so if you get a chance, Facebook.com, the Allan Harris Band. And thank you very much for having me. And Angela, you still look as pretty as you did when I look at that album cover as a young 16-year-old boy. My mother said, "What you doing in that room?"
All right, now, mute the mic.
Nothing. Broke my heart when Ron Isley married you. I wanted to beat him up. But anyway, I'm gonna leave it now. I'm gonna leave it at that.
That is so funny,
Come along.
That is so great. Love to see it, man. It was just a matter of time, Allan. Your day came. Your day came. So today. Yeah. Awesome, Beverly, please.
Because I know I'm in the midst of all these musicians. So what I'm going to say, my top three, Nora Neale Hurston. And I love, because she has her quote, a quote I always remember: "Love makes your soul crawl out from its hiding." And also, same time to James Baldwin, because the quotes that you could pull out of all of his writings and his speeches, you know, and there's one that I'm going to recite, and this I recited to my students in each semester. I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hates so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain. And I think it's just so apropos right now. And in terms of music, I must say, the triple threat. When I started working with this young lady who they told me was this triple threat, this quadruple threat, this, quintuple threat. And she walked in and we just became not just associates, business associates, but friends. And right now in my, in my phone, what I'm listening to over and over, and I just mentioned this to her not too long ago, Lay Your Troubles Down, that she wrote and produced. Well, she actually worked and produced for Ron Isley, her and Ron Isley. Fabulous song. And right now it's the song that's in my heart. So thank you so very much. And thank you, Ms. Winbush, for coming on this morning. Yes, and I did. I forgot to call her back last night, but thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Will, Allan, Dr. Bess, Orge. Thank you so much. Mr. West, for inviting me, and I'm telling you, it's been a wonderful experience. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Your presence is appreciated and loved and accepted, and we thank you for just offering yourself and your energy to what's going to live on for these young people who are watching for a long time. So thank you, Beverly. Appreciate you so much, and for connecting us with Angela as well. So with that being said, Will wrap us up, take us out. Beverly, did you tell us where we can follow you? Did you say
that?
Two
things. PMTPR121 at gmail.com. PMTPR121 at gmail.com.
Awesome. Amazing. Thank you so much. Last but not least, certainly, Will Calhoun, please share with us some good resources.
Resources, I'll start with the text and the film piece really quickly. Please check out Dr. Henrik Clark, any of his work, any of his writings, Dr. John Henrik Clark. Please have a listen to his speeches and his work. It's very important that you listen to him. Film-wise, recently I've been checked out the HBO, I think it's on HBO, called Exterminate the Brutes. And that's great. Raoul Peck, fantastic filmmaker and producer. If you talk about the history, some of the things Allan and Beverly brought up too, and Angela, if you want to get some context for it without doing a bunch of research, you kind of want it in your face. Raoul's my favorite for putting it in your face factually and letting you visualize and get a vibe on that. So please check out, I think it's still on HBO now, Exterminate the Brutes. The other thing, and speaking of Baldwin, who's one of my favorite writers of all time, a film for the young people, I'm Not Your Negro. Please check that film out, and then you'll get a little bit of a vibe there. Musically, to make it quick, I would say Miles Davis is one of my favorites of all time. His career, with all the madness and the duress and what was happening politically in this country, still some amazing music has come out of there. And I listened to all the different generations of Miles' music, which I think is quite phenomenal. And I would say for more of my influences, young and funk and that kind of stuff, and rock, Jimi Hendrix. I love both renditions of his group, but I'm a fan of the Band of Gypsies, not because they were all black, but was because he was back from Vietnam, and those songs like Machine Gun and Power of Soul came out of an experience of being a black paratrooper. And thanks to us, he injured his ankle in one of his jumps. He was able to not serve and went to the hospital and sent back home and became the Jimi Hendrix that we know. So check those out. A lot of things kind of, I think, within that context of the art. You can find me at willcalhoun.com. It's my website. All my other sites are the same. It's Will Calhoun Drum, DRUM. That's Instagram, and that's the tweeting. My visual art is called Rhythm Art. My artwork is Will Calhoun Art, A-R-T, willcalhounart.com. And you can get into some of the visual mixed media things that I love doing. Thanks to Ron. Thanks to you, the doctor here this afternoon, and Allan and Beverly and Angela was a fantastic surprise, and I think a very important person for your students and young folks to really know about her tremendous career that she's still having and had. She's a perfect addition to this conference. But I want to say thanks to everybody. Feel free to contact me anytime, and hopefully you'll do more of these with some more brilliant people, because you are serving a very necessary lane that needs to be serviced. And I appreciate you and Ron getting together and having these conferences, because one of the things that Allan brought up the barbershop, and I'll close on this, the barbershop, the beauty salon, and the laundromat, the church, and the kitchen are the 5 places where we get most of our information from before we go to the other places.
Sorry about that. 5
places that we kind of conjugate and get information and feedback on. So congrats to you having these open conversations.
Thank you for joining us. I mean, it just really is a win for CUNY BMI as a whole. And all of you have just added such a unique perspective. We appreciate your time, your energy. We went over a few minutes, but we'll be sure to share the video with you in post editing. And thank you for the time together. For those who are watching in the BMI community and beyond, appreciate your support and your love. And we hope you share this with your communities, even outside of the CUNY system, because we know that young people need to hear this, and those who are even older and our age and older who need to hear about the history and the power of music in our community. So thank you for this time together again. We are off for July. We will see you back in August, the second Thursday of August. And until then, remember, I am BMI. It's been Dr. Shawn Best with you today.